Adil Ferris had just heard the most ironic sentence of his life. "Thanks for the bailout, bro. I'll take it from here." That's what his younger brother, Daniel, said with a smug grin, leaning back in the restaurant office chair like he'd inherited an empire instead of being handed control of the very business Adil had saved with everything he had. Adil was 38 years old and had just watched his own family decide he wasn't fit to run the restaurant he'd sacrificed his home for. They were all gathered in the back office of Ferris Bistro, their family's Mexican-Italian fusion place located in Lahore. Just 3 months ago, the place had been circling the drain minus 72 hours from complete shutdown, with Rs 3.4 million in debt, vendors walking away, and the landlord threatening legal action. It was Adil who stepped up, selling off his downtown flat every single rupee of equity he had built over 5 long years. His parents, Jamal and Salma Ferris, had built the place 25 years ago, and now they were quietly watching it die. When Adil offered everything he had to keep it afloat, they accepted. But now they had chosen Daniel to take over. "We've decided. Daniel will handle the operations," his father said, eyes avoiding Adil's. "He's better with business and people. You've always been solid in the kitchen, son. Stick to what you're good at." His mother Salma was silently rearranging already organized papers, her way of avoiding conflict. In Adil's lap sat the folder he'd prepared: financial strategies, marketing ideas, renegotiated vendor terms, a full plan for reviving the bistro. 16 years of work reduced to a title: kitchen manager, reporting to his younger brother, who'd barely worked here part-time and only when he felt like it. Daniel, meanwhile, was already reaching for his phone to likely update the restaurant's Instagram bio with his new role. Adil didn't argue. He didn't fight or yell. He simply said, "Sounds good," closed the folder, and walked out of the restaurant through the dining room he had helped redesign twice, past family photos of 4 generations, through the very door his grandfather had carved by hand in 1987. He sat in his truck for nearly half an hour, not angry but calm. For the first time, he saw clearly what he'd been refusing to accept for years. Being the reliable son meant people stopped noticing your reliability. It became invisible, expected, taken for granted. Daniel was always the star, the one who smiled effortlessly, who could win people over with charm and stories. Adil was the worker, the fixer, the one called during breakdowns and emergencies, the one expected to quietly absorb pressure and carry weight. Back in 1999, when his parents opened Ferris Bistro, Adil was 14, Daniel was 11. Adil washed dishes that first summer and never left. By 18, he was handling prep. By 25, managing operations. By 30, he was the spine of the entire restaurant. Daniel, on the other hand, had studied marketing, jumped around advertising agencies, and lived a life filled with meetings and selfies. At family dinners, Daniel would share glamorous stories, and Adil would talk about burnt compressors and chicken deliveries. "Daniel has vision," his father would say. "Adil's our backbone." But vision, apparently, meant posting, reels, and following online trends, while backbone meant sweating alone in the kitchen during power outages. The pandemic in 2020 nearly destroyed everything. Revenue dropped by more than half in just 2 months. Debts mounted. His parents had already mortgaged their home. Daniel was broke, and Adil had one major asset: his apartment. When he offered to sell it, his father had said, "It's just temporary. We'll pay you back once business picks up. Adil knew that was a lie, but he did it anyway. He transferred the lease to his name to settle debts and ensure the business stayed afloat. Over the following months, he noticed a pattern. Would come in late, take a few photos, post a story, and leave. When a supplier called, they asked for a deal. When the oven broke, a deal fixed it. When new staff needed help, they came to him. But to their father, Daniel's charm was the future. Adil's competence was just routine. That night, Adil didn't go home. He ended up at a quiet bench by the canal near Racecourse Park. The cool Lahore breeze brushed past him as he watched the still water. That's when it hit him, a truth so simple it made his chest ache. His family didn't respect him, not really. They respected what he did, but not who he was. They trusted him to carry the burden, but not to make decisions. 16 years of holding the place together, and still, he wasn't leadership material. In their eyes, so he made a call. He called someone who did understand, both food and leadership, Zara Hussain, a young and brilliant chef he had mentored. She worked at a downtown food lounge, but had real vision and cooking talent. Her pop-up dinners had been featured on foodie blogs, and she had been looking for the right business opportunity. Zara, it's a deal. Do you still want to run your own kitchen? Absolutely. Why? Equal partnership. Your name on the board. Complete creative control on the menu. There was a long pause. Are you serious? Dead serious, Adil replied. We can start this week. After he hung up, he stared at the dark sky from his truck window. Tomorrow, Daniel would show up at Ferris Bistro, thinking he was the boss. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Daniel strolled into Ferris Bistro just after 9 a.m., notebook in hand, a fresh cup of overpriced coffee, and the grin of a man who believed he was about to revolutionize the restaurant world. Meanwhile, Adil had already been in the kitchen since 5:30 a.m., handling the prep work as usual. The kitchen smelled of marinated beef, spices, and fresh-cut vegetables. The same comforting smells Adil had lived with for more than a decade. Their longtime prep cook gave Adil a subtle look that needed no words. Word had already spread. The family drama wasn't a secret. In their culture, nothing stayed private long, especially not something like this. You okay? Bye, Bilal asked in Urdu. I'm good, Adil replied calmly. Just another day in paradise. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed energized by his self-proclaimed promotion. I've been doing some research, he said, flipping through his notebook as he leaned over the kitchen counter. We need to modernize the menu. Korean-Mexican fusion is taking off. Kimchi quesadillas, bulgogi tacos, gochujang. Pass the people, eat that stuff up on TikTok. Adil was carefully breaking down a tray of chickens when he paused, looked up, and said, We're a Mexican-Italian fusion bistro. That's what our regulars love and what they come here for. Yeah, but we've got to evolve, Daniel insisted. Social media trends are how new customers find us. I've been analyzing engagement data. It's all about staying relevant. Adil sighed, not out of disagreement, but out of the growing realization that Daniel had no real grasp of the business they were running. He wasn't speaking from experience. He was speaking from internet slideshows. Have you actually talked to our customers about what they want? Adil asked. Daniel shook his head. The data is clear. That's enough. That moment solidified it for Adil. This wasn't going to work. His brother's idea of managing was hashtags, filters, and food trends that didn't align with their customer base, their values, or their operational capacity. By 11 a.m., when a produce delivery arrived short on Roma tomatoes, a key part of their signature arrabbiata sauce, Daniel was nowhere to be seen. He was in the office, updating the restaurant's Instagram bio to say, under new management, Adil handled the issue. He called a backup supplier, negotiated an emergency delivery, and reworked the prep schedule with Bilai to make the sauce stretch without losing quality. Lunch went on, smooth as ever. But when Mr. Kamal, one of their regulars for nearly a decade, complimented Daniel on how efficient everything seemed, Daniel smiled wide and said, "Just good management." Adil didn't correct him. He didn't even respond. Later that afternoon, their father, Jamal, dropped by. He smiled at customers, walked through the kitchen, and chatted with Daniel about the new direction. Afterward, he stopped Adil by the kitchen counter and asked, "How's the transition going?" "Smooth," Adil said flatly. "Daniel got some strong ideas?" Jamal nodded. "He's got real vision." Adil returned to chopping onions without saying another word. That evening, as the staff started cleaning up, Daniel pulled Adil aside. "Hey, just wanted to say, I know this whole transition thing must feel weird, but I value what you bring. Kitchen operations, daily stuff, you're really solid at that." Adil stared at him, quietly absorbing the tone. Daniel genuinely thought he was being generous, like acknowledging Adil's decades of work was a favor. "I was thinking," Daniel continued, "we could formalize your role. Kitchen manager. Maybe even throw in a small raise." Kitchen manager, a small raise. For the man who had literally sold his home to rescue the restaurant. Adil just said, "I'll think about it." That night, he didn't sleep. Instead, he finalized the legal paperwork with Zara Hussein. They were set to meet at 6 a.m. the next morning to sign the partnership agreement. It would make them equal owners of the newly restructured business, now named Ferris and Zara Bistro. When Thursday morning arrived, Lahore was draped in a cold, grey stillness. Adil arrived even earlier than usual. He went through every record, every invoice, every forgotten email on his father's office computer. What he found confirmed his worst fear, and then made it worse. The 3.4 million rupees debt he'd paid off wasn't the full picture. There was another Rs. 900,000 owed to smaller vendors. His parents had quietly arranged extended payment plans without telling him. Food costs were up to 37% of revenue, well above the industry standard. Inventory wastage, spoiled goods, it was all there, bleeding out from 1,000 little cuts. But then Adil opened an old email thread his father had never deleted. It was with a commercial real estate agent. The messages dated back to the previous August, before Adil had sold his flat, before the family meeting, before Daniel was appointed. The subject, selling Ferris Bistro. The emails were chilling in their clarity. The agent had given an honest appraisal, due to debt and poor maintenance. Estimated value is around Rs 5.2 million. If profitability improves and costs are brought down, value can be pushed higher within 12 to 18 months. Jamal had responded by asking if the timeline could be shortened. The agent had suggested exactly what they did. Bring in someone with energy and RV to attract buzz and improve image. Daniel wasn't made manager because he was talented. He was made manager because he was a face, a decoy, a tool. They were prepping the restaurant for sale. Adil had unknowingly funded the setup. When Zara walked in that morning with her knife set and a cup of coffee. Adil looked like he'd seen a ghost. He handed her the printed emails. Her face darkened. They were going to sell the whole time, she said quietly. He nodded. And they were going to leave us both behind. Are you still sure about this? She asked. He didn't even hesitate. Now, more than ever, at 7 a.m., they changed the locks. It wasn't about kicking anyone out. It was about protecting what they were building from the people who had tried to hijack it. Bilal arrived at 8 a.m., took one look at the two of them working side by side in the kitchen, and asked, but change, new partner, Adil replied. Same job, same pay, better food. Bilal smiled and tied on his apron. Achahai, Zarurat, tea. At exactly 9 a.m., Daniel showed up, confused when his key didn't work. He knocked on the glass door, increasingly agitated. Adil let him in through the back and handed him an envelope. Inside was an official notice. His role had been terminated. Effective immediately. 2 weeks of severance included. You can't do this, Daniel said, disbelief rising in his voice. Dad made me manager. Adil didn't flinch. Dad doesn't have that authority. I'm the leaseholder. I control operations. What does that even mean? It means you're no longer in charge of anything here. Daniel froze. I'm calling Dad. Go ahead, Adil said, handing him a printout of the real estate emails. But you might want to ask him about these first. Daniel's hands trembled as he read. All the blood drained from his face. They were going to sell. Adil nodded. After you made it look profitable. Daniel sat down, stunned into silence. Daniel stared down at the paper for a long time. His lips parted slightly, as though he wanted to argue, but no words came out. For the first time since Adil could remember, his younger brother was speechless. That alone was a rare enough sight to feel like a kind of victory. But Adil didn't smile. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reality finally catching up with all the illusion. Adil pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Look, he said, calmly. You can make a scene if you want. You can call Dad, call a lawyer, try to spin this your way. But if you fight this, you'll be fighting me, not them. And unlike them, I actually know how to run this place. Zara walked out from the kitchen, holding a plate in her hand. She didn't say anything, just set the food down in front of Daniel. Try this, she said softly. Korean spiced carnitas with traditional rice and a gochujang cream drizzle. Daniel stared at it for a second. Then, still holding the printout in one hand, he picked up a fork with the other. He took a bite. His eyebrows raised immediately. His face shifted. He took another bite, then another. He didn't speak until the plate was empty. This is amazing, he finally said. That's what happens, Adil replied. When your menu ideas are rooted in actual cooking, not just hashtags. Daniel looked up. How long have you been planning this? Since Monday night. His mouth opened slightly again. Seriously. Sometimes the right decision doesn't need more time, just clarity. Daniel leaned back. What about Ami and Abu? What about them? Are you going to tell them? Everything, Adil paused. That's up to you. You can show them the emails. You can tell them the truth, or not. I'm done pretending this business is something it's not. Daniel nodded slowly. Then, surprisingly, he asked, Do you think I could have done a good job if things were different? Adil hesitated. I think you might have tried, but trying doesn't replace experience. or consistency. When people's livelihoods depend on you, trying isn't enough. Once Danielle didn't argue at exactly 10 a.m. Ferris and Zara Bistro officially opened for business. Their first customer was Mr. Kamal, the loyal regular who had been coming for years. He looked up at the new sign. New name, new partnership, Zara said as she poured his usual cup of chai. Same favorites, some new magic. As long as you don't mess with my stuffed peppers, he said with a wink. Never, she promised. That day's lunch rush was more than successful. It was electric. Zara's touch in the kitchen transformed everything, not just the food, but the energy. The staff moved faster, cleaner. The flavors were bolder. Even regulars who usually ordered the same thing tried new specials and complimented them. One customer even posted about the food on Twitter, and within hours, they had a mini viral moment. Online by 2 p.m., they'd served more covers than they typically handled in an entire day. Daniel, who had quietly stayed for the lunch service, got up around noon. Before leaving, he turned to both Adil and Zara, shook their hands, and said, "Good luck. You're going to need it when Abu finds out." "Probably," Adil said, "but not for the reasons he thinks." That afternoon, Adil made a list of all the people who needed to be informed. Suppliers, vendors, payroll, insurance. One by one, he called them, calmly, clearly, professionally. He introduced Zara as his new equal partner, updated ordering procedures, restructured their business account, and had their accountant begin the official transfer of ownership by 5 p.m. Ferris and Zara Bistro was legally and financially its own entity, clean, independent, and future-focused. That night, after closing, Adil and Zara sat at one of the side tables with notebooks open, spreadsheets up, and a half-empty bowl of beer. Between them, "You know your parents are going to come," she said. "I know. And they're going to be angry. I'm not worried about anger anymore. I'm only worried about what's right for this business." She studied him for a second. "It feels like we've already been working together for years." "We have," Adil said with a small smile. "We just didn't have the paperwork." Friday afternoon came, and with it, the storm. Adil was in the kitchen slicing vegetables for that evening's dinner special when he heard the unmistakable voice of his father Jamal shouting in the front room. "Where is Danielle? Why isn't my key working? What is going on?" The hostess stammered something, trying to explain, but Jamal didn't wait. He pushed through the kitchen doors like a storm in human form. Behind him was Adil's mother, Salma, quiet, shaken, trying not to show how nervous she looked. "The hell is this?" Jamal shouted, waving the partnership papers that Danielle had clearly handed over. "You think you can restructure our family business without telling us?" Adil didn't even look up from his cutting board. "I didn't restructure it. I rebuilt it. You're forgetting your place," Jamal snapped. "No," Adil replied. "I finally realized it." Salma stepped forward. "Adil, Beta, please. We need to talk about this as a family." Adil wiped his hands, turned, and looked his mother in the eyes. "Like how we talked about selling the restaurant behind my back." The kitchen went still. Even Zara froze. "What are you talking about?" Salma asked. Adil took out his phone and opened the email thread. He handed it to her. She read slowly. Her face changed shade with each line. "Jamal," she whispered, "you said these were just ideas, not actual plans." Jamal was silent, his fists clenched. "You lied to me," Salma said. "We needed options," Jamal muttered. I was just protecting options, Adil interrupted. I gave you my entire savings. That was your option. That was a loan, Jamal insisted. Then show me the paperwork, Adil replied. Because I signed a lease. I paid the bills. I turned this place around. You're making a mistake, Jamal barked. This is still our restaurant. No, Abu, Adil said quietly. It's mine now. Adil didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence after his words was enough to make even the exhaust fans in the kitchen feel too loud. Jamal looked around, maybe expecting someone, Zara, Salma, even the staff, to back him up. No one did. No one even moved. This is betrayal. Jamal said at last, though his voice had lost its usual thunder. You turned your back on your own family. No, Adil replied. I turned away from being treated like a spare part, from being used and then pushed aside. I gave you everything I had, and you planned to walk away with it. Salma stepped toward her son, her voice soft and tired. Adil Beta, we were scared. We thought we were going to lose everything. You already did, Adil said. You lost my trust. Jamal stood there for a moment longer, papers still clenched in his fist like a shield that no longer mattered. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the kitchen. Salma looked at Adil, her eyes filled with unspoken apology. But she followed her husband, still the quiet shadow behind his anger. The kitchen remained frozen for a few more seconds before life returned. Zara picked up her knife and returned to chopping. Carlos resumed marinating chicken. Adil turned back to his onions. Life didn't stop just because people got uncomfortable. The next few weeks were a storm of change, but a storm they were finally prepared for. Ferris and Zara Bistro started to become something new. The menu was tighter, sharper. The dishes combined Zara's flair with Adil's, discipline, creativity with structure. The regulars loved the updates. New faces started showing up every week. Food bloggers, photographers, and eventually even a small write-up in the San Antonio Express started drawing in the curious crowd. Zara's short-form recipe videos on Instagram and YouTube Shorts gained traction. Within 3 weeks, one of her 45-second cooking clips hit 100,000 views. They gained 3,000 new followers and started getting DMs from influencers asking for private tastings. More importantly, their food costs dropped to 29%, thanks to stricter inventory and zero-waste policies. With more foot traffic and better vendor terms, profits doubled within the first full month under the new partnership. The change wasn't just financial. The team felt different. Staff started taking pride in being part of something that felt real. Lucia taught a Saturday skills workshop for line cooks. Adil led weekly team meetings that actually involved feedback. The culture of the restaurant had shifted from survival to ambition, and slowly word got around. Daniel came by twice that month, usually at closing. He didn't talk much. Once he helped sweep the dining room, another time he brought an old marketing friend to introduce them, not for a job, just as a favor. Adil noticed the difference. Daniel wasn't trying to be in charge anymore. He was just being present, being helpful. How's the new job? Adil asked one night while they both wiped down tables. Less stressful, Daniel said. Turns out I'm actually good at helping people build brands, not running them. Adil nodded. I'm glad. There was a pause. You think Mum and Dad will ever come around? Daniel asked. Maybe, maybe not. But this place wasn't built to win their approval. It was built to survive. And it had done more than survive. 8 weeks after the relaunch, Ferris and Zara Bistro was not only stable, it was thriving. Their reservation list stretched to weekends in advance. They started getting catering requests from corporate clients. They hired 2 more kitchen staff and finally gave Carlos the promotion he'd earned long ago. Then came the email. Food and Wine magazine wanted to feature the restaurant in an article about the new wave of Mexican fusion in Texas. A full interview, a photo shoot, and national exposure. Adil read the email 3 times, just to believe it. He printed the email and pinned it on the staff board. When the photographer arrived the following week, they insisted on shooting in the kitchen first. "This place feels real," the photographer said. "You can taste the work in the food." That night, after everyone left, Adil and Zara sat again in the dining room, staring at the glowing sign that hung above the bar. Ferris and Zara from scratch. "I still can't believe we did it," Zara said. "You believed before I did," Adil replied. "Do you miss them?" she asked softly. He didn't need to ask who she meant. "Yes," he said, "but I don't miss who I was around them." Zara nodded. "You were never invisible, Adil. They just didn't know how to look at you." He smiled. "Maybe they would come around. Maybe they wouldn't. But that wasn't the point anymore. Because for the first time in 16 years, Adil wasn't fixing someone else's mess. He wasn't carrying the burden of other people's bad planning. He wasn't the invisible one keeping everything afloat. He was leading, he was building, and every dish that left the kitchen, every laugh that echoed in the dining room, every customer who walked out satisfied, it was all proof that you didn't need to inherit power to deserve it. You just had to earn it.